wherever we go today, whenever we watch the news or we turn on social media, we hear news of yet another crisis, yet another problem that is escalating. Like recently, the bombings in Syria, in Paris, in Pakistan, in Brussels, in Kenya, in Turkey, just to name a few. Our climate systems are changing. Global warming is now a reality. 2015 was the hottest year on record. And yet are we alarmed? Climate change may soon become the biggest threat to the survival of our species. In just over 40 years, we managed to reduce the biodiversity of our species by 50%. And if we're looking at how are we sharing and distributing wealth on our planet, an Oxfam study of last year showed that 1% of the world population in this year is owning as much as 99% of the world population combined. So surely something is really going on. But yet, are we alarmed? Are we awake truly to what is happening? Or are we like the famous frog in warm water? And the story goes that if you put a frog in warm water and you start slowly heating that warm water, the frog is not going to jump out of the water to save its life. It's going to stay there until it collapses and it dies. So what are we doing? We are warming our world. Are we awake to what is going on? So when I look at all of these issues and I look at all of these problems, I ask myself, underlying all of this, what's really the fundamental cause of all of this? And could it have something to do with love? Now, what would happen if love, our real care for each other, and our care for our planet would be our guiding principle? It would be our governing systems. It would be our institutional design. And I ask myself, is there a country in this world where this is being applied in this way? And I found the Kingdom of Bhutan. Now, in the Kingdom of Bhutan, 77,000 inhabitants. Interestingly, the Kingdom of Bhutan is carbon neutral and has made a commitment to remain carbon neutral. And the way that it measures its development and the progress of its people is by a gross national happiness index, which it's implemented since 1972 on the basis of its ancient Buddhist values and a deep vision of love. So it showed me that it is possible. And interestingly, its sustainable development policies and practices are integral to its philosophy and its wisdom and its foundation of love. So when I looked at all of this combined, I asked myself then, is there another way that we need to look at the problem? Are these isolated issues truly, or what is the underlying pattern? Because I have found very often, if I have the right understanding of a problem, the solution is right there in the problem. So this got me to search deeper and to ask myself, if love and the lack of love and the lack of care is really the underlying pattern, is the underlying problem, then how can love provide a solution for our world in crisis? And in order to answer that question and explore that together with you here this morning, I'd like to share with you first what really happens to our state of mind and to our consciousness when we go through great fear and shock and pain. And the way I'm going to share that with you is by the example of this piece of paper. Now let us just imagine for a minute that this piece of paper right now represents our mind and it represents our consciousness. So when we're all relaxed and we feel open, nothing gets stuck in here. Our vision is clear, our relationships are clear. Now you may all recall a time when you feel frightened and you feel in pain and you feel in conflict, like, even just like my body. As I'm recalling that time, I'm tensing up, right? Just like this piece of paper. We're tensing up. And there's a natural impulse in us, it's understandable, that when we are confronted with that pain and fear, we want to disconnect, we want to close, we want to contract, to protect ourselves. The problem is, if we stay in this state for too long, and we don't realize it was an impulse to respond that way, and it becomes our status quo. Now, when I see our world, this is what I see. And the problem is when we're in this contracted state of mind and consciousness, our emotions get stuck in here. It's like our memories, it's like frozen time. Traumas, frozen time, get stuck in these little wrinkles. We all become internally divided. And we cannot see anymore. Is that in reality? We are one humanity. We're all made of the same stuff. We're made of the same energy. And yet when we're in this contracted state, living in our own little problems, in our own little corners, in our own little worlds, we don't see that. We don't experience that. So there's not just the impulse in us in the face of danger and pain to close and to contract. There's another impulse as well that is essential for the sustainability of life, and I believe this is the stronger impulse. And that is the impulse to open up again, to reach in and to reach out, and to connect and to expand our minds and to expand our hearts. So I ask myself then, if that is the stronger impulse in life, yet our world is in this state, what is it that we can do? What metaphor could I also share with all of you as my TEDx idea to help change the world that can make love really concrete, something that we can all apply? And I'd like to share that with you now by the following metaphor, and it's the metaphor of the vector. Now, the interesting thing is a vector is a quantity that has magnitude and direction. A vector has a point of origin. And I'll be sharing with you later why that is really, really important. The magnitude of the vector is determined by the length of the vector, or the reach in and out. And the direction of the vector is determined by where it is pointing to and what it is pointing for. A vector also helps us to see how one point in space and time is related and interconnected with another space and point in time. This is essential if we want to understand how we are interconnected, how are we impacting the world around us, and how are we impacted by that. So when we apply now the metaphor of the vector and the understanding of what it represents with the power of love, which is really also the power to understand what truly matters in life, how to build bridges where we are divided, how to stand for something that is essential in all of us. It gave rise for me to 3 essential questions. And it's those 3 essential questions that I'd like to share with you this morning as a practice and an application now, how we can combine the vector metaphor and the power of love as a vector of love. And those questions are questions you can ask yourself any time of the day or night, whatever you're doing, whether it's your personal life or your professional life. So let's explore that. The first question that I, as a vector of love, ask myself is, what do I reach from? What is my point of origin? Now, as you're looking at this vector behind me, what are you seeing? Are you seeing the circle, or are you seeing the space? This is really important question to ask yourself. For me, as a vector of love, I am not letting the circle define my point of origin. I reach from the space where we are unified, the heart of our humanity, that which matters the most, and especially in times of crisis and difficulty. So my point of origin as a vector of love needs to be really, really clear. Because this circle, just like I shared with you earlier about what happens when we go through the state of contraction, this circle will grow sometimes nicely relaxed, and other times it contracts. And if I let my reach and my stand in life and the way that I connect be defined simply by my state of mind or how I experience myself, then I cannot be a bridge for what matters, and I cannot be a bridge for our future, and I cannot be a bridge for love. So this is the first question that I always ask myself. What do I reach from? And then the second question is, how far now can I reach inside and outside myself? This is essential. How far can you reach inside and outside yourself? Because that determines your magnitude. And again, if you are contracted like that, you may find it's really difficult to reach deeply inside and to reach deeply outside. And especially then, we have to make the extra effort to reach even further inside and further outside. And that brings me to the third question then. So once I've answered those first 2, what am I reaching for and what am I reaching to? Again, am I reaching to the circle, the way you define yourself, the way as a humanity we have all divided ourselves? Or am I reaching for the heart of our humanity, that which is fundamental in all of us, all through time? And is that in fact the impulse in others that I also help to feed? Remembering that, just like me, when I'm afraid and when I'm in a state of crisis or shock, I may want to contract. We all have those same impulses. But when I really reach for someone else's humanity, I'll remember that the impulse in them I want to feed is the impulse, in fact, to be able to feel safe again, to open up, to reach in, to reach out, and to reconnect with each other. So once you know that, you know your point of origin, you know how far can I reach, what's the magnitude of my reach, and what am I reaching for, then I know my impact. I know how I'm impacting the world around me and how I am being impacted. So what I'd like to share with you now is some practical examples, how we actually applied those 3 questions. And that is in our work in the Education for Sustainability program, which we developed with the Catholic Schools Network here in Mauritius since 2011. And we applied it in depth with 3 pilot schools, which you can see here below. And what we did is we implemented sustainability principles and methodologies based on a vision of love in the whole curriculum system. And we understood, first of all, that the point of origin was to be very clear. What is the purpose of education? And the purpose of education is to prepare young people to become stewards for our world and for our future. And therefore to empower them with the sustainability competencies and practices of care that enable them to do that. And so we understood then also in relation to the second question, what do we need to do to really increase their in-reach and their outreach to each other? And we worked on that in the program as well. And we were very clear about the focus, what we are reaching for. Their preparedness and also their motivation as stewards for our world and for the future. So that leads me now to the question to you. On the basis of what I've just shared with all of you, how can you help change our world? What can you do with this? When later you go home, just like I shared with you earlier, you'll probably be bombarded with news of yet another crisis, yet another problem that's escalating, or perhaps somebody who needs your help. What can you do with this? Can you be clear about both your current state of mind? Are you contracted? Are you open? Because that influences the way you're going to respond. Where you're reaching from inside yourself when somebody calls for your help. Can you go deeper? Can you go deeper to really the heart of your humanity? And remember that it's the same for everyone else around you. What can you do to increase both your reach in and your reach out to each other? And to have a very, very clear focus on what is important in life, what matters. Because remember, the world in crisis, our climate change crisis, the refugee crisis, the terrorist crisis, the social inequalities rising. We made that. It didn't just happen to us. It's the result of how we are living. It's the result of how we are with each other. And it can be very confusing, as I shared with you earlier in this piece of paper. When our world is contracted like that and wrinkled up, we forget we are one humanity. And essentially we all have the same response patterns in us. But we also have the potential of such deep love and such deep care. Too often when I go to present or give conferences or workshops and being told, yes, but it's all a problem of human nature. We like to blame everything on human nature. And what I share then is, this isn't the problem of nature. There's nothing wrong with our nature. The issue is perception and action. You've got to understand what defines and forms your perception. Are you contracted? Are you open? And what guides your action? Is it the circle that defines you, or the larger space behind it, where we are universal, where we are one humanity, where we have the same potential. So I want to ask you now, please join me in becoming a vector of love. The future, it's in your hands, it's in my hands, it's in our hands together. Let's join that as a vector of love to help heal our world for a better world and future. Thank you.